We're live. We're on.
Good morning. This is the Allegheny County IDA. My name is Judy Hawkins, Chair of the IDA Board, and we have a full board today. And I'm going to have people go around and introduce themselves because we have a couple of guests as well at the table. So we'll let people tell us what they want us to know. So why do we start with Barb? Go ahead, Barb.
Barb Benjamin. I'm the operations director for the IDA.
Chase Tascone. I work for AJ Gallagher Insurance and handle the insurance program for the Allegheny County IDA.
Doug Frank, and I'm a board member, treasurer of the IDA.
Randy Schindler, I'm a board member of the IDA.
I already introduced myself.
Rich Ewell, board member of the IDA.
Tim Boyd, guest, Deputy County Administrator, Allegheny County.
John Ricky Boyd, board member and also county legislator.
And Craig Clark, the executive director of the IDA.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, our agenda today has a lot of interesting things in it, and we'll get started right away. First of all, let me just, we have just a correspondence to read real quickly to the board. This is from the Leadership Cattaraugus County, and it is a thank you note. Mr. Clark, thank you, and the ACIDA for your financial and organizational support at our Leadership Summit. And that is from Leadership Cattaraugus. So Leadership Allegheny also participates in that. So it's a great thing. So, okay. First thing on our agenda is the board minutes. Would someone like to make a motion to accept those, and then we'll see if there are any changes?
I'll make a motion to accept that.
Okay, thank you, Rich. Second?
Second.
Okay, thanks, Randy. Are there any questions about it? Any changes that need to be made? Well, thank Barb again for doing a very complete job of capturing the discussion and the action of the meetings. There are no questions or changes. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And that is passed. Okay, the next thing on our agenda is an executive session to discuss a contractual legal issue. So we'll need a motion to go into executive session. Wait a minute. Did you want to do Chase? Yeah, let's do Chase. Okay. We'll hold off on that. I'm sorry. I'm thinking I didn't write that down.
No,
Chase.
no problem.
Okay. Chase is going to be discussing the insurance policies, and so we're ready to hear.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll try to keep this brief because I'm sure you have a full agenda, but Craig had asked me to come in and give an overview of the insurance policies for the IDA. And our agency has worked with the IDA for many years. And Rich and I were talking recently, years ago, when we originally wrote these policies, there were very few insurance companies that would want to write or that could write coverage for an IDA because there are a lot of difficult exposures. There are difficult decisions that a board has to make as a part of an IDA that may be controversial. And so it was really difficult to place coverage. And at that time, we were able to write it with Cincinnati Insurance Company, mainly because they were, and they continue to be, one of the few companies that have a human underwriter that we can call and talk through these issues with and come up with creative solutions on placing coverage. So part of that was that we had to place certain coverages with other carriers, and so it's broken out into a few different policies, and I have those organized on one page for you here. So I figure I'll go down through here. If there's any questions that aren't included on this document, just let me know. If I don't have the answers today, I can certainly get back to you with those and follow up. But the Cincinnati policy, the package policy includes coverages for the buildings, the properties, and general liability. And The building that we're sitting in right now and the building that's next door are covered under replacement cost and under a blanket limit of insurance. And essentially what that means is we get to take the replacement cost coverage for both buildings and add them up into one large limit that can respond if there's a claim in either building. So if there's a fire at the OFA building next door, we would have up to this $3.55 million limit to repair or replace the building. So it's super flexible, excellent coverage, and the limits are listed right there. We have a small amount of contents that are listed at that OFA building, even though it's rented to the county and most of the property inside is owned by the county, but we do keep a small amount of contents in case there's any that's moved back and forth between the two buildings. We have an employee dishonesty limit of $500,000 on the policy. That was recently increased over the past couple of years in 2022. Previously, it was $25,000. And as the IDA continued to grow and gain greater access to funds, it was necessary at that time to increase these limits, and we might discuss increasing limits further down towards the bottom. And then we have general liability limits on the policy of $1 million per occurrence. And one thing that's important to know is the Belmont parking lot, so the truck stop and the parking lot that's across from the old Belmont school and the Friendship property, those are specifically excluded from the general liability on this policy. That was one of the prerequisites for writing the policy with Cincinnati. And so we have those insured on a separate policy that's down below. But the limits are $1 million per occurrence, and then we have umbrella limits down below too. Are there any questions on the Cincinnati package?
Just a real quick question. You talked about the contents of the OFA building, and this building too. Does that include personal items that employees might have there that might have been destroyed?
That probably wouldn't be listed under that specific limit. There could be incidental coverage that's built into the policies, but I wouldn't know without specifically reviewing.
Okay.
So I can get back to you with that answer.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions before he goes on?
Okay. So then we have the separate general liability policy for those properties that I mentioned up above. We also carry a $1 million limit on this policy too. It just has to be insured separately from the Cincinnati package. And then there's also a separate policy for directors and officers, which is going to cover acts of wrongdoing from a public official. Any of those those difficult decisions that can be controversial that I mentioned before, any litigation that's associated with that could be covered under this policy here for a limit of $1 million or $2 million per year.
Chase, does that policy also cover, as an example, the ACUC and the other organizations other than the IDA?
So the ACUC is a separate entity with a separate board, although it's comprised of, I believe, all the same board members. So that would have to be listed as an additional insured or an additional named insured on that policy. That's a great question. I have to review to make sure that that is listed separately on the policy.
And when you do that, check on the CRC as well, because we have another group that does bonding.
Okay.
It's a Capital Resources Corporation.
Okay. We'll look into both of those issues. We have auto liability insurance that's built into these policies, although the vehicles aren't owned by the Allegheny County IDA. There's coverage for hired and non-owned auto liability. So driving vehicles for IDA business, you could cover the property damage or medical costs that were involved in those accidents. And then we have an umbrella policy of $1 million per occurrence, and that sits over top of your general liability limits up above. So the liability on the Cincinnati policy, if it's $1 million per occurrence, really you have up to $2 million per occurrence with this umbrella. And one thing that I would want to note with these Cincinnati policies too is that Cincinnati continues to offer the policies on a 3-year term, which is unique for most insurance companies. Very few of them are able to do that, and that does benefit the IDA over time, especially in a time that we're in right now, post COVID-19 pandemic, where insurance costs and many other costs have continued to rise by a large margin. This locks in those premiums, those rates for 3 years, so you don't see the rate increases. So those are set to expire in 2027. So over the next 2 renewal years, we're guaranteed to not see any rate increases on those policies. And then there is a separate policy for the ACUC, like Randy mentioned. It is a separate entity with a separate board, so we do have to cover the general liability on a separate policy. That's also insured with Cincinnati, but those the umbrella is higher on that policy at $4 million. So that carries a higher limit. I would say, I have notes down at the bottom that, you know, potentially we could offer higher umbrella limits for the IDA policies as well. We've seen an increase in umbrella claims in recent years because for a lot of different reasons. I mean, the nature of our society is increasingly litigious. Social engineering claims have gone up significantly. The costs for legal expenses and medical expenses continue to rise. So the $1 million liability limits are met more quickly now than they were years ago. So we're seeing more and more umbrella claims. And if we get options for those two, each additional $1 million layer of umbrella coverage is less expensive than the layer that comes before it. So I could provide options for a $2 million umbrella, $3 million, and so on, if the board wanted to pursue that.
How about, like, can you give us quotes up to $5 million?
Yeah.
All right, thanks. Just take a look at it. And I think the umbrella on the ACUC is $4 million because I think we go by Friendship Dairy or, Saputo, and because we were on their property, they required $5 million limit. So that's why there's a $4 million umbrella, because they made us do that for the water line. So, and which they probably should make it,
Yeah.
I think they should. It's not a bad thing.
Well, so thank you for clarifying that, Rich. And that'll kind of lead me. One of my other considerations that I put down below was the liability associated with contracts. So the IDA has always done this in the past, and I just wanted to make note that, going forward, continuing to just notify our agency of any upcoming contracts, because we can continue to work with the IDA to make sure that there's language included in these contracts that'll shift the risk from the IDA to the contractors that we're paying all this money to do the work. Their insurance policies have clauses that can name the IDA as additional insureds and indemnify the IDA if there was ever a claim. That's something we already do, but just to continue doing it. And then I also wanted to make note, so we did increase these employee dishonesty limits to $500,000 in 2022, like I mentioned before. If the amount of funds available to the IDA continue to grow, it would be, we might want to keep an eye on that, because there's only, we have one employee, and insurance companies always want to see a segregation of duties when it comes to these types of funds. And I'm sure the IDA does an excellent job with it right now. And, we make sure that everyone has an eye on these funds as much as possible. But really, there's going to be only so many people that are signing checks and keeping an eye on those sorts of things. So it might make sense to increase those limits in the future if greater access to funds becomes available. And I'm seeing, just for New York State contracts with grant funding and those sorts of things, it seems like those requirements are increasing to closer to $1 million for certain state contracts, which might not apply to the IDA, but it seems like the norm for these coverages are continuing to increase. So anyway, going forward, as we continue to grow, it might make sense to keep an eye on that. Any other questions on anything that I mentioned so far?
Yeah, what's the total premium for the whole shebang for the year?
So I have the premiums per policy listed at the top right corners of each policy.
Okay, that's what I thought is. So 35,000.
Maybe 26, isn't it?
30.
28.
Oh, yeah, sorry, my bad, yeah.
It's still real money.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, threw an extra one in.
So I'm coming up with 28,725.
Okay,
Right.
thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's good for the board to look at it all together because we pay them in different they're all come due at the same time. So we've never really looked at it recently all together.
Right, yeah, and they are, there's various reasons why they're spread out among different policies. And, there's certain aspects, like Craig, you and I were talking about the reconstruction costs on these buildings,
Right.
especially during the COVID pandemic, and the cost of materials and labor increased by 30-40% overnight. And, at that time, so we were on a 3-year term with Cincinnati at that time. And then, we readjusted the building values to be current with today's reconstruction costs. So these building values are higher than they had been in the past, and we've added coverages over the years to get us to these limits.
Chase also brought up that because the IDA board is appointed by the legislature, there's probably some D&O coverage for us as individually and as a board from the Allegheny County policy as well. But I think the reason we bought our own policy is because do we want to wait until there's a lawsuit to find out how that's going to work, or do we want to have our own policy? And that's why we bought our own policy years ago, I think, for 20.
And most boards have their own policy.
Right, yeah.
What's DNO? What's that?
Directors and officers, like public officials,
Oh,
like
okay.
for wrongful acts,
Protecting board members.
non-bodily injury, non-property damage.
And the reason we assume that there would be coverage under the county policies somewhere is because the board is appointed by
Right.
the county.
Exactly.
Now, it can be a gray area to Rich's point, so it does probably make sense to have our own policy. That's why we've done that in the past.
Do we pay the cost of the insurance on a one-time payment, or do we pay it monthly?
You do.
Periodically.
Periodically?
Some of them are annual.
And that's what I was saying,
Some.
because the
Yeah.
annual numbers aren't always, they don't come due all at the same time.
Correct.
So
And that's why I
they're
think it's good to see it all together, because we pay 5,000 here, 5,000 here,
Mhm.
and then all of a sudden now we see it's
Yes.
quite a bit of money.
Yes, and to your point, so they do, all the policies, or most of them do renew at different times.
That's
and
correct.
Some of them are on, or one of them is on direct bill too, so they can come directly from the carrier.
Right.
Most of them are on agency bill, so the bills come from our agency, so. So you're right, having it all in one place is probably gonna be helpful. To answer your question, as far as one payment versus multiple payments throughout the course of the year, I believe they're all on a one payment plan with the exception of the larger Cincinnati package policy. There are installments on that.
Right.
I think so.
Which I can finish the remaining schedule for that. I'll make sure.
I think we save some money by doing it in a one payment.
See,
And we pay the whole year for each policy.
yes, in certain instances. Now, for the Cincinnati package policy, we reached out to Cincinnati this year and we asked if that was the case, and it actually wasn't with Cincinnati for this year. And because it's a 3-year policy term, just out of curiosity, because this is something that had been offered in the past, we asked, okay, what if we were to pay the premiums up front for all 3 years? Then would there be a decrease in premiums, which was not the case either at this point. They'd offered it in the past, but not anymore. Any Any other questions while I'm here?
I have one other,
Sure.
I was waiting on, you mentioned that Cincinnati is one of the few companies that offers this type of insurance. And is it a danger, or should we be concerned about them no longer offering such a policy in the future?
You answer that question.
Wellsville Country Club, it was insured by Cincinnati, and they decided that they no longer want to insure it.
Oh, Philadelphia.
One of those
Oh,
cities.
okay.
NFL city.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, you got it. Yeah.
It can happen.
Yeah.
So are you going with Cincinnati now? I'm putting you on the spot.
Different city?
No, we're not. We're
No,
not.
Probably Acadia, probably.
Yeah.
And I do have.
Okay, that's not our business, but,
So.
so are we good for, a good length of time?
Yes, so that's another benefit to having these 3-year terms as well, is this term that we're in, the policies renew on an annual basis, but we do have a 3-year policy in place that goes up through August of 2027. So that's another benefit to these extended policy terms. It is a good point, because if there is a limited market and a company, gets out, it can be difficult to place coverage, or you don't know what the premiums will be at that time. But I will also say, now that we're affiliated with AJ Gallagher, as of November of this past year, I think we'll have greater access to markets too, which can benefit us if that ever does.
We as the IDA, or we as
Oh,
your agency?
Evans Insurance.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, our
I thought that.
agency.
Just wanted to
Yeah.
clarify.
So how long have we been with Cincinnati then?
I was going through the records earlier today. I don't have an exact date, but at least the past 15 years, I would say.
Yeah.
Have we had any claims?
Roughly.
Yeah, there have been claims. Yeah, there have been some slip and fall claims. If somebody slips and falls in one of the buildings, or minor property claims. But I don't think there's ever.
Nothing
been
big.
Even not just through the IDA, but I can say we can say that we have an increasingly litigious society and we live in a litigious region. But I have certainly seen an increase in lawsuits with public entities, insured by our agency, and just seeing it in the news. It seems these claims are becoming more and more common. So even if we haven't had claims in the past, I think that the probability of future claims is probably higher. I think that's probably fair to say. Yeah.
The way it's going, isn't it? Okay. No other questions? Well, Chase, we thank you very
Yeah,
much.
thank you.
Thank you, and I'll-
explaining all of
This is a
that.
public
It is-
meeting, so you're definitely invited to stay, but you don't have to.
Yes,
How's
definitely.
that?
Well, I appreciate it. I'll get the answers on the directors and officers and the umbrella quotes that we talked about before. Okay?
Excellent job.
Okay, thank you very
Thank you.
much. It's good for us to have that information.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Jake.
Have a good meeting.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chase.
Thanks.
Have a good day.
You too.
Rich was easy on you.
Yeah.
He knows more about insurance than I do.
Oh, yeah, right.
All right. Have a good day, everybody.
Have a good one. Thank you. Okay. Oh, sorry. Just trying to get rid
No,
of
it's
this.
okay.
Yeah. Okay, so next on the agenda is the executive session for a discussion of a contractual legal issue, and we would need a motion to go into that session if we're ready for it now. Okay, thank you, John. Second,
Second.
Doug, thank you very much. All those
Here we go, we're
Okay.
good.
All right, thank you for patience of waiting for our executive session. The next order of business is the abstract report, the expenses. And we'll take a look at that and vote on it.
Okay, I make a motion to approve the abstract report.
Okay, thank you. Second? John, thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. And the next one is the banking and financials. Again, ask any questions that you may have. Okay, if there are no questions to approve,
I'll make the motion.
thank you, Doug. Second? John?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Okay, thank you. Okay, next on the agenda is a review longer-term use of funds.
We've had some basic discussions, but I think it's time that we probably set up, and I know Doug would be one of them, probably 2 board members to start making some proposals on how we're going to be using the funds. We're going to be getting the larger scale funds now.
Okay. Okay.
Doug, do you have a preference of who you want to work for? This should be a 2-person
No.
committee.
No. We're volunteers.
I just think it's good to start that process now.
Are you nodding?
No, I'm just
Oh.
agreeing with what Craig said.
Okay. Do we have any volunteers who want to be on that 2-person committee with Doug? The other person?
Sorry, Randy.
We got a busy season coming up on the board. That's all.
Randy looks awful and interested.
You had some good ideas.
Yeah. It's not going to be a lot of
May
meetings.
I please be on that group?
Wow,
I would just,
you got it.
Thank you, Randy.
Okay, Doug and Randy, have
I'll get you
volunteered
guys to meet and we'll
to
start
be
talking
on
about
this
this.
group. Yeah, great.
I just leave that as a discussion item on the agenda.
Okay, sounds good. All right, moving on to the building maintenance report. We have some action items there. We have done a review of the insurance policies already today. So that is taken care of. There is no action to come out of that. The Friendship property sale is next on the
Yeah,
agenda.
there's no updates on that. I'm still trying to figure out if they can figure out a way to work with a lawyer to transfer that. So
Okay, and the Allegheny County LDC.
the county has, and they'll be looking at the P&D committee approving a resolution so that the county approves us forming the LDC. So we'll be able to do that shortly.
Okay, do you think they might be voting on that today? Is that?
Oh, no,
today
it'll be
today?
next
That's not
P&D
today.
meeting
Not
next
today.
week.
That'll be next.
So it'll probably be about 2 weeks for you.
Yeah,
to the
probably.
full
Okay,
committee. But it's fine. Allison's looked at it. Everybody understands. So we're good.
okay, good. All right, thank you. The Allegheny County Strategic Plan Economic Development, the EDO.
They have met the small subgroup, which is a small board, and they are working with Hodgkin Russ about forming their bylaws. That'll also be formed fairly soon. So I would guess by the end of the year, they'll have the EDO set up.
Okay, great, good progress there, that's good. The CBDG Micro Enterprise Grant.
I've talked to Mike, and we've now gone through 7 different draws. It's just over $140,000. He says all but one company thinks they'll all be finished here in the next month or 2 as far as the grants.
Okay, will he be coming back to give us?
Yeah, we'll get him back at the next board meeting.
Okay,
Do a summary. By then he'll have everybody completed, I would hope, except for one though. The only one we're having trouble with is Adrian, the fella on the glass straws. He's back in town now, but hopefully he'll take advantage of that grant.
okay. And what are the prospects that that program might continue with another?
Well, then
Round?
we're about, once we get enough spent, we can get another grant application in. We have to have 75% of the grant money spent, so we're getting close.
Good. Okay, any questions on those? Kind of zipping through. Okay, Gateway Center to the Western New York Wilds.
As Tim has alluded to, and I talked to Tom Windus, sometime in the next month or 2, they're going to be putting the road in because that's been approved budget-wise, and they've got time to do that. And the water improvements that are basically Appalachian Regional Commission funded will also be starting, I would think, in the near future because they now have the Empire State Development is going to be the basic agency. That was the problem, is all these grants, even though the county's acceptable to do it, they have to have a basic agency, and ESD is an acceptable agency. So that should start fairly soon too, I would think.
Okay, well, good. Okay, and then we have clean energy projects.
Yeah, under the clean energy projects, the one thing we need to discuss is that we're at the point of Alley Cat Wind Project is ready to finalize and get their certificates for sales tax exemption. And part of that process, they have to pay their fee. And they've recommended or suggested that they get their fee paid in the thirds, which would mean they would pay us a third of the fee immediately at the closing for the sales tax exemption. And then the next 2 years, pay the next 1/3. So they, within 2 years, would be paying a third each.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to approve that.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
I'll second that.
Okay, thank you, John. Okay,
Yeah.
any discussion on that motion?
And I'll work with our lawyer to get a document for approval so that they know that they owe the full
Make that part.
the full
Okay,
fee.
make it
Okay.
a legal document. Mhm. Good, good.
And I'll make a motion that Craig can execute that, right? And
Oh.
invoice them.
We'll
Yeah.
just,
All that part of the motion, Barb.
yeah, part of
Yeah,
the original.
and we'll send you a
Yeah.
copy of that document once we
Okay.
get it ready.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, good, okay. If there are no questions, we're ready to vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, no opposed, we're good with that.
Yeah, one other issue on the Cuba solar project is an oil project, has been delayed for various reasons. They have not constructed anything. They have not started any work on the project. And they were actually billed for a pilot, the first year's pilot starting in January. And it's inappropriate for them to have to pay the pilot because the pilot's for the equipment on the project site and the project is not even started.
Mhm.
So I'm asking for the board to approve that they would not have to pay that pilot
Okay.
pay.
When you say January, is it this past January?
Yes, in January, yes. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, we need a motion on that to approve, that, the,
Delay of that pilot
delay
payment
of the
until the
pilot
construction is
until the
started.
construction is completed.
Yes.
Someone like to make that motion?
So,
Thank you, Randy. Second, thank you, Doug. Okay, any other discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
The other update on the clean energy project is the 4 NSF projects in Burns are going to be starting fairly soon, so they'll also be closing on their paperwork as well. So they've been in contact with our lawyers and they're finalizing their paperwork and should start, I would say, within the next couple of weeks.
Okay.
And we'll get their fee payment as well.
Okay, good.
So that leaves the only ones there's one in Wellsville, the one we just approved it in Wirt, and I think there's one more, the Cuba one. So there's only 3 that haven't started that we've approved. So that's pretty good. I know a lot of the counties have been 2 to 3 years delay in some of these projects. We've actually got some pretty good projects. They've all been moving.
Okay, that's good news. Okay, how about the Great Lakes Cheese Cuba facility?
The one potential interested tenant has decided not to move in, but we're still working with the town as well as with Ashley EDO to try to figure out how we can get that out into the public domain so that people know the facility is actually available. So we're working with Great Lakes Cheese on that.
Okay, is Kathy Young's,
That was the one
Still
that she's still willing to help us. They've had someone, but they decided not to move to Allegheny
Okay.
County.
but she'll
But she'll
continue?
continue to work with us.
Good, okay. And the EPA Brownfield grant?
I'm hoping to have the grant documents assigned by the next board meeting because it's supposed to start in October. So we have finalized everything with them as far as I know. So hopefully then we can start, which will be a good project for the county. It's going to be a way to identify our brownfields and also do some phase 1 and phase 2 so we can get some developers in here to work on the brownfield sites.
Okay. Okay, that concludes the old business. Is there any new business to bring up? Okay, anything for the good of the order? Other than this has been a very good meeting. And you don't have to put that in the minutes, Barb. Is there
Yes,
a
you do.
motion for adjournment?
So, second.
Okay, moved and seconded, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, we are concluded.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
we had 0 people watching today, so, you know. I always, at top,